be heard just a sec. Sorry, I may now go ahead. Now we'll start. Forgot to unmute.
Hi, this is Janine Radke with the Garden City Area Chamber of Commerce, and we are here tonight for our business after a virtual one, our one. And tonight we are visiting Whitney Buchman from Buchman Bestial Behaviors. Whitney, how are you doing this evening?
I'm doing pretty good. Now go ahead. Now we'll start. Oh, forgot to unmute. We're doing pretty good here in our home, just chilling with some puppies around.
Well, I mean, I would imagine that you do have quite a few animals since, that's kind of your business and working with different kinds of animals. So,
right. Definitely kind of my shtick.
Yeah, definitely. So how many animals do you have? What do you have?
We have 4 dogs, 2 cats, and 4 bunnies, and 2 fish tanks at this point in time.
So kind of your own miniature zoo type thing.
Yes.
Yeah. So how long have you been in business?
Well, I've been in business as the Buchman Bestial Behavior since February of 2018. So we're going on just over 2 years now.
Oh, awesome. So how are things going right now?
Things are actually going pretty well. Obviously, like all the businesses in our community, we took a major hit when the coronavirus pandemic started going into full swing. But overall, we're doing pretty good. Our monthly income obviously shot down to almost nothing, but we were able to get one of those PPP loans. And using the PPP loans, we actually were able to keep our doors open. And slowly, everyone's starting to figure out that one option that they have is online training consultations. I've actually been doing online teaching and online learning. When I was with the zoo back in 2011, I started doing that. So I have a lot of experience. When I started my business, I actually set myself up for online consultations. I've been doing that pretty much since day one as well. Obviously not for the local people. Most people want me there physically when possible, but but I do it for my out-of-state clients because I actually do have a number of out-of-state clients. And of course now, pretty much everybody, the main way to do it is to do it online because I don't want to go from home to home because it's the amount of contamination that could be presented, and then I don't want to be considered a vector for that for later on. But in fact, actually, the other day, just last week, I had a client who is in Kentucky that hired me because they got a recommendation from a animal shelter in Indiana, which I thought was kind of funny.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty cool, actually. With the, everybody using more of the online type, avenues to be able to do things, it makes a lot of difference to be able to reach out farther than you would just in Garden City. So I know I want to come back to kind of what you're doing now, but I kind of want to back up a little bit and talk about how you got started in this area and working with animals.
Okay. Well, I actually started long time ago. That's actually goes back to about when I was 3. My family said I was going to be working with animals since about age 3 on, and they basically helped set me up throughout my life for that, which is kind of ironic because when I was real little, apparently I was allergic to animals, so that was a constant battle that my parents had to deal with. But so back then, just loved animals. Then around 10 or 12 years old, I can't remember when exactly it was, but I started up with 4-H, and I started with 4-H dog training and animal showing. From there, I actually lived in Omaha, or in Bellevue, Nebraska, which is just outside of Omaha. And I actually did internships, or I shouldn't say internships. I did volunteering through high school at the Omaha Henry Dorley Zoo, working with animals. From there, I decided to go the degree route, and I went to Iowa State, started with a degree in zoology, then found out that zoology was actually not what I wanted. That's more of a physiology type degree at Iowa State. And so they actually moved me to a thing called animal ecology, which goes into mixes with like forestry and natural resource and ecology. So combines the physiology, the behavior, the environment that the animals are all in into one, and then had specialization. So I specialized in wildlife care. From there, I actually got a job in Georgia working with kangaroos. So we actually did kangaroos and we did shows. So I had to work with a lot of animals to get them to participate in an arena with about 100 people or so, as while at the same time giving a 45-minute talk to an audience while animals are doing things around me. Um, Everything from there, uh, they actually promoted me to lead keeper position at that facility. Then my wife and I kind of wanted to come back to the Midwest, so started looking in the Midwest. Put out a number of job applications. Actually, got offered a number of jobs, and I kind of did a full swing through the state. I lined up a lot of interviews right in a row. So I started in Topeka, then went to Great Bend, and then went here all in like I think I did all those interviews in 5 days or something like that. Um, got out, hired at all jobs, but I ended up choosing this one because I liked the community. The pay was really well compared to the others, uh, and then switched to education. And then one thing that kind of happened later on, I ended up with a dog that was very aggressive, and she would attack a lot of animals. And one thing that I did was I used all my training that I'd learned up until then with her, but it just wasn't working. So one thing after her, we ended up having to put her down for the safety of a number of other things. She'd actually severely injured a number of animals in my home as well as a number of people. So we had to make that call. It was an unfortunate call, but it also really stung me deep down. And so literally then I just kind of switched my research and I started switching into a lot of aggression behavior research. And then I went and there's this weird thing that can happen, and I talk about it actually when I'm teaching animals, is sometimes we put barriers. And I was taught one way to teach animals at the zoo, and then I was taught another way from all my dog training experience. And the thing was, there was like this barrier. You do this at work, you do this at home, and then I realized that those two kind of blend together, and there's no real barrier. A dog learns the same way as a cat, as a bird. They all learn the same way. You just have to tweak it to the individual species you're working with. So I started actually implementing that into my current kind of philosophy and moral look into animal training. So around 2018, I decided to go out on my own, and because I also noticed that there really wasn't a lot in our community with regards to animal training, particularly what we call non-aversive, or trying to avoid aversive or punishment as much as possible to teach animals to create a positive experience or positive reinforcement methodology. A lot of my training, I hesitate to say it's just positive reinforcement. It's animal behavior analysis, what I kind of take from, which is comes from this. It's a lot of psychology and science that's actually involved with what I do. But I decided to take that, give it to the community, because basically the heartache that I went through with my dog, I don't want other people to have to go through, if that makes sense.
Sure, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. I like that you phrase what you do and looking at that as your philosophy of being able to do that. Because, that when you have a philosophy of doing something, that really plays into how you do things and how you treat the animals and, their owners and people that are reaching out to you for help. So that's really cool. So what kind of animals have you actually done training with?
What have I done training with? Okay, so obviously I've worked with kangaroos. I've worked with kookaburras, which are the birds that laugh in the zoos, and sometimes they actually get on movies. They actually use the kookaburra call to pretend that there's a monkey sound, because they sound a little bit like what people think a monkey should sound like.
Yeah, they also have a song that I learned in Girl Scouts for
Yes,
the
and then they got
kookaburra.
those.
Yeah.
Worked with a number of parrots. When we had a few lorikeets, which is a nectar feeding parrot that's from Australia or Australasia region. Australasia being those sets of islands, and Australia and New Zealand and all those. But we trained it to walk across the rope around during events. We had one kangaroo trained to open its pouch and stick its head in on cue. Um, worked with the animals, worked with a number of the animals when I was a zookeeper. Tried to work with some of the primates and a lot of the birds. I was in the bird area and the education animals, so the animals that go to schools. And um, so I would actually work with that. I was actually very proud. At one point in time in the zoo, we kind of old school, just scoop up the chinchilla, put it in the thing, take it to the event. I started actually, particularly when I right before I when I got became curator at the in the education department. I started working on getting them to willingly go into their carriers, so that you're not forcing them in. We actually can just put it there, and they'd go in willingly for a nice little reward, and it'd be a much more positive experience for the animals. So, worked with snakes, and you can train snakes. You can train just about anything. You can train fish. You can train snakes. You can train everything is trainable. It's just how you do it is what's changed. And also, the problem with reptiles is they don't have a lot of mammals and birds have a lot of facial expressions. They move all the things around, and you can kind of see things easier. With reptiles, they just kind of have one face. So really, you're just kind of basing it off of, are they going towards a thing or away from a thing, kind of a little bit, or how they're interacting. But uh, obviously, dogs. I had an aggression cat, so we started working on how to ask the cockatoo to go into the cage rather than just shove it in, because basically by scheduling, the husband was always the one that had to put the bird in. So the bird started having a worse relationship with the husband. So I kind of came in, stepped in, gave him a way to communicate and ask the bird to go different places and move around and do things, rather than just grab it and force it, which is a traumatic event. Nothing likes to be forced to do anything. So those are, and then of course a number of dogs, lots and lots of dogs since I've switched over.
Yeah. Well, it's all about building that relationship, just like with humans.
Exactly. Very much. Very much.
Not that you would use all of the same techniques in training a human, like, for example, a husband, but,
Well, you'd be surprised. You would be surprised. There are a number of, I'm always listening to podcasts, going into forums, reading, I'm actually, every year I also apprentice, virtually apprentice, because there's not many around the area, but I'll apprentice with another trainer, because there's always something to learn. No matter how long I do it, somebody will have a technique that I will go, oh my gosh, I'm going to add that to my tool belt for later on. But you'd be surprised at how much actually overlaps between human behaviorists and animal behaviorists. There's a lot of times I'll get with a client, and it turns out that they're a behaviorist at the school or something like that, and we're going through and talking about the process, and then suddenly they just go, wait a minute, this is like applied behavior analysis. I'm like, yes, they actually came from literally the same university like 30 years ago. Same department, same people. It's all the same techniques. You just have to tweak it how you're doing it. For example, honestly, with humans, you don't need to treat or candy every time. And the dog's not necessarily either. All you need to do is just let them know that they did something right, and they are happy enough with that, as far as the humans are concerned. But a lot of the techniques are very similar. A lot of people, the thing that I always love it watching people when they're like, they got it. I'm like, yep. Told you.
Here's the thing about the husband end, because I was
Oh,
getting